This week we're here with Toyota's SUV version of their Hilux. David, what's it called?
It's called the Toyota Fortuner Crusade.
Just in case it's not a continuity error, we are taking our masks off for the person who's doing the talking the most. David, over to you. Let's have the front of the car.
They have tweaked this a little while ago, particularly to make a number of things stronger. One of them is the bigger black grille at the front. Another is what they call the skid plate. The other thing they did, and this is the makeover a little while ago, was to make these much thinner. And they did that, Alan, to look more meaner.
Because it's like a face, and they actually focus group the face of the car. Did you know that? And we move to the side of the car, David.
The Crusade has the 18-inch wheels, 17 for the lower models.
Yep, sits very high up. And also high because it is a genuine off-roader. We've got some side steps.
And the back is particularly interesting because the Crusade had a new set of lights that is slightly different.
So they're different to the regular model?
I believe so, yeah.
Right. And what do you think of this odd little kink here in the as it comes along? That doesn't sit well with me for some strange reason.
Well, it breaks the flow of the slab-sided.
Well, I suppose so.
To some degree. Whether it breaks it well or not is another question.
But it makes this bit look terribly, terribly chunky.
Here?
Yeah.
So this one has the towing package, and in fact they increased the towing rate by 300 kilograms. It's now 3,100.
The back is electric.
On the Crusade.
Now, if you stop that just halfway up, you'll see that it's got a button to open. It's also got a little knob like a little nipple. If you press that, when the door's shut, it will actually lock the car. Inside, it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me.
So they proclaim it as a 7-seater. We prefer the expression 5 and 2 halves.
But you'll notice there's nothing under the floor. That is because the wheel is accessible from underneath, and it's a full size.
Well, the first thing is it's tall, but I've got the
That's actually a lot easier than it looks getting into some other SUVs.
It is a little cramped here because it is the Crusade with electric seats, so you don't have as much room to put your feet.
You could put that up though, and that'd give you a bit more space.
Yes, it would, but here is quite good. And I sit high.
Yeah.
I'm looking over the top of this.
Headspace.
An extra inch or two.
This is how you get into the back. You pull this forward and the seat goes forward. And when you are in the back, the seat can slide forward. However, that really restricts your leg space, so that means the second and third rows would be cramped.
It does have rubber, but it's covering the carpet.
Which is fairly nasty looking carpet.
Well, very basic.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it elegant.
No.
It has a 3-point power plug, which, by the way, is 220 volt and 100 watt, which is good. There's also the 12 volt power point here.
And that's 120 watts.
And it has bag hooks here and a map
And that's
container.
on both seats?
On both seats. Now, Alan, there is no vents here because they're up here. With controls of auto off and fan speed.
Nice. And that can also be controlled from the front. There's only 2 climate zones, one for the front, one for the back.
It's more theatrical getting into one of these, isn't there?
Well, I think anything theatrical is a good thing. We've got some electric adjustments down here, so that's where you could raise the seat if someone was in the back. The doors, it's fairly hard, fairly hard covering. This is nice and soft, normal window and mirror controls. Down on the side, this is part of the towing pack. There's all sorts of other 4-wheel drive related stuff, plus some diesel related stuff, a stop-start, and a fairly standard dash.
It has the cruise control on this standard sort of stalk down here too.
Yeah, it hasn't moved up onto the steering wheel, but it's also got paddles, which I think is somewhat hopeful, and this kind of timber look plastic for the steering wheel. Steering wheel buttons, that's all pretty standard, but very old-fashioned. The seating inside is this leather accented stuff. You can't really tell what's leather and what's not.
This is a bin. It's rather big. And functional sits at the one level. We have some controls here, including the diff lock and turning off the traction control. We can choose various modes for driving.
And you know, David, that really makes the ride so limo-like.
Does it?
No, it doesn't affect the suspension whatsoever. It's not that sophisticated.
It has Apple CarPlay and Android, of course.
Couple of cup holders there.
Couple of cup holders fit. Usual control, somewhat old in its style here.
But still very functional, and below that we've got seat heating for two, look.
Now this is 8 inches now, they increased that by 1 inch.
I do like an extra inch, Dave, and sometimes that makes all the difference. Okay. But the problem I've got is this god-awful Dick Smith System 80 clock from what, the 1980s? What the hell is that about in a car that's worth, David? What is this worth again, did you say?
It starts at $49,000 plus on road.
And the Crusade?
It goes up to $61,600 plus on road costs.
We've got the JBL, you're quite right, and there's also some nice padding here, and just in case that you've forgotten that you're in a Fortuner, it's marked here on the glove box, but perhaps that's only needed after a night out.
There's no question that once you're in this car, it is much quieter than the rattly diesel sound that you get when you're standing outside. When they upgraded this a little bit more significantly than recently, they just added in things like the emergency announcement. If you have a big accident, it will automatically call a Toyota service. More recently, they have done those sorts of major changes more to the Hilux than to this one. So about 12 months ago they made a more significant upgrade. They improved the engine, still 2.8 litre diesel, but they increased the power to 150 kilowatts, which is an extra 20, and the torque to 500 newton meters, which is an extra 50. And it now gets 7.6 litres per 100 on the combined cycle.
The city is where this is going to get most use. And one thing that I've noticed about all of these SUVs that are made from an LCV, so like a tray-back ute, is the suspension is really hard. And it handles like you'd expect an LCV to handle. Although, as I pointed out, it does have upgraded suspension. It's got proper independent suspension instead of leaf springs, straight from horses and drays of the 19th century. It does have some of the mod cons because it was retested a few years ago. And of course it came out fairly well, but now it would have to have blind spot monitoring, which this doesn't have. It does have lane control, and this is that piece of road I've taken you on before, where it's got markings of stuff all over the place. The interesting thing about this Toyota system is that it only kicks in, the active lane control only kicks in when you turn the active cruise control on. So I've turned it on, it says up on the dash that it's ready, one press down and it's now active, as is the active lane control. Now here's one of those dodgy lane markings. It doesn't know what to do. Oh, Jesus Christ. I don't know if you saw that again, but we went sideways, and it's doing it again. This thing is trying to steer not on the road markings, but on the leftover from construction markings. If you weren't ready for that, that'd be quite a shock. It's tried to take me into the other lane, ignoring the white markings and going for the scrubbed out markings instead. Very annoying. And the other bit is, as soon as it acquires a car in the front, the digital speedo disappears and I get the active cruise control stuff, like it has now. And if I want to get back to my speedo, I've got to press the return button. It's so annoying. If I wanted that, I'd put it up there. The cabin noise is fairly good at this speed, and you can see I've got my Apple CarPlay up, which means that I'd be able to listen to my tunes and so forth on a long trip. And I know you're probably going to poo-poo me, but not having fully automatic wipers is really annoying, especially in a car that costs this much money. You know, they're intermittent, yes, but gosh, for this kind of money, I'd expect automatic. And one last thing before I go, now that I'm nearly home. Down on the side of the center console here, it comes out and digs into you so that when your leg is over, that's just ridiculous. That is all this week from the Toyota Fortuner Crusade. Not a bad car. It's not my cup of tea. I like something a little bit softer, David.
It's somewhere between a Kluger, which is very much for the family, and a Prado, which is absolute off-road capability. And it's not a bad compromise for a little less price.
A lot of money though, but as always, David, it is that time again. So if you've liked the film, and actually even if you haven't liked the film, hit like.
Leave a comment.
You cannot leave a comment if you haven't liked the film. But above all, just, I think around here, to subscribe.